Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you all. So today we're coming back to a deck that we haven't revisited for quite some time, and I don't think anybody has really revisited or thought about this deck in quite some time. That's going to be Adventure Prank-Kids. So I think the last time we played this deck extensively, or maybe even at all, was like in the Duelist Cup. I'm trying to think if I ever actually came back to this deck after Meow went to 1. I don't think I did. And again, I don't really think I'm necessarily alone in not thinking about or coming back to this deck, because I haven't really been seeing anybody, like I haven't seen it on the ladder, I don't think, since Meow got to 1, like at all. Maybe like one time in like those months I've played against Prank-Kids, one time, but even then, I honestly couldn't tell you for sure. And, you know, if you look at, like, you know, Master Duel meta and, like, the Discord and, like, the subreddit, like, you just, like, nobody's talking about this deck, really. I mean, of course, there are some people talking about it, but, like, it's not very, not very much within people's, like, minds right now, Adventure Prank-Kids. And so, surely, you know, I'm looking at all this and I'm thinking to myself, like, this deck has to be underrepresented, right? I think a lot of the reason that people aren't really even considering this deck, like, not even just, like, considering and then dismissing it, I think just not even considering it at all, is, like, you know, you think about the cumulative hits of the deck, right? Not just Meow going to 1, but, of course, the, you know, Water Enchantress going to 1, the Fusion Destiny going to 1, the Celestial getting banned, the Destiny Hero Celestial getting banned, are all, you know, hits that have impacted the deck, because, of course, it's, you know, relying pretty, not heavily, but decently on the Adventure and DPE engines, as well as, of course, again, the Meow going to 1 being the big one definitely hurts, not kills necessarily, but does hurt the deck's long game here. So it's definitely understandable why this deck isn't being, you know, again, discussed, but to think that it's not seeing enough representation to even really be qualified as a rogue deck is definitely, I don't think that's I can't imagine that's correct. Again, I've talked about this a lot in terms of a deck's place in the meta, that there are two major factors to it, right? And that's 1, a deck's power level, 2, a deck's representation. Power level obviously being, you know, just how inherently strong the deck is in the current meta, and then representation being like, okay, how much are people being, you know, aware of this deck and playing it? Because the power level alone does not necessarily determine a deck spot in the meta. It, in theory, should, right? In theory, if you're just scoring decks based on how strong they are, then representation shouldn't be a factor, but it is. And it matters because, well, you know, it's a matter of whether or not you're actually going to end up playing against that deck. Obviously, if the deck's not being played, its power level can't be shown off, therefore, it's not meta. So I think this is a case where representation and power level are definitely not, you know, the two levels are very skewed here. With decks that are tier 1 like Branded Despia and Sword Soul Tingy, we tend to see power level and representation are about even, right? The deck's being fairly represented for how strong it is. This deck, like I've said many times now, is definitely being underrepresented for how strong it is. I'm not saying this is a tier 1 deck by any means, but I do think it is at very least a rogue deck. I think possibly, and I say this about a lot of rogue decks, I think with enough representation it could even be a tier 3 deck. Having played with the deck a bit myself, now I've played just 5 games so far, which is an incredibly small sample size, and conclusions cannot be drawn from sample sizes anywhere near that small. Honestly, it would take, at least in my opinion, like, you know, 3-digit, triple-digit, at least 100 games in order to really start to, and that even by itself I don't think is a total fair evaluation, but to start to get an idea of a deck's power level. So, you know, I'm going to clarify that I've only played 5 games. I'm not trying to overhype this deck, but again, I think it is at the very least a solid rogue deck. I don't think that is overhyping this deck at all. I think that it's being slept on in that regard. And I'm not saying, like, oh, everybody should be playing Adventure Prank-Kids, but I guess I'm just saying that I'm surprised more people haven't tried to go back to Adventure Prank-Kids. Because the lines are still there, right? You know, the Adventure into the Prank-Kids line, you know, the Battle Butler setup. There is also the matter of the Battle Butler setup itself is also not quite as good as it used to be. Particularly, I'm thinking of Branded Despia, right? Where they often have cards that don't really care about being destroyed. So that kind of disruption tends to not be, or Mirror J doesn't really care how you remove it at all, as long as you or just banishing or destroying it. If it gets bounced, obviously, then this effect doesn't go off, but I'm talking, of course, about the end phase effects to destroy all cards in the opponent's field. So, yeah, I suppose in that regard, That's another factor against, I suppose, the Adventure Prank-Kids deck, is that maybe, you know, Battle Butler isn't quite as devastating as it used to be. It's still a pretty powerful effect, being able to board wipe your opponent's monsters twice. You do have to be mindful about your Meow Meow Moo use, right? Because, of course, we only get one. And like I touched upon earlier, this takes away a lot of the deck's late game, or like long game, so to speak. So there are a lot of games where you'll just do the Battle Butler setup, and, you know, you can board wipe, and then your opponent concedes, and then that's fine, right? But there are also games where you'll do that, but the opponent still has plays, maybe answers your board, and then you have to, you know, of course, play out the rest of the game. And so with Meow Meow Moo now at 1, we really got to consider, like, what does the rest of the game after that look like? Because once Meow Meow Moo is banished, it's, like, gone. In that regard, it might be a bit better to kind of, like, be more mindful of how you use the Battle Butler, because even if the Meow Meow Moo is in the graveyard, it can still potentially be put back into the extra deck for Prank-Kids Pranks. So we do actually have a game in one of the games I'm going to show coming up here, where we make use of Prank-Kids Pranks to put back Meow Meow Moo multiple times in order to keep playing into the long game. So it's definitely important to be mindful of, like, when to use your Meow Meow Moo and when to not. So in that regard, you have to be a bit more mindful. You can't just, like, shotgun the Battle Butler's effect. I mean, you'll still often use it twice if you're able to on your opponent's turn, but again, you have to be just a bit more mindful before you just, like, shotgun it off and banish a Meow Meow Moo. And of course, we definitely can't be misclicking with Bow Wow Bark anymore. I didn't do that in any of these games we're gonna show, but I've done it, like, multiple times playing this deck in the past, and I have to imagine that misclicking to banish your one Meow Meow Moo for Bow Wow Bark would feel incredibly bad. So we definitely are. I'm speaking more to myself than to anyone out there right now, anyone else out there right now. So I'm just reminding myself to definitely be mindful to not make that misclick anymore. As far as the extra deck goes, it's pretty standard as far as what we were doing, and the main deck too, honestly. It's pretty standard as far as what we were doing with Adventure Prank-Kids before. I did forego the Forbidden Droplets in order to make room for, like, more Imperms and Veilers. I actually have considered playing Droplet in this deck even now, because Droplet, as I've mentioned before, is actually really good in this meta. There's just not a whole lot of decks within the meta that can necessarily make use of it, but Droplet's very good against both Branded Despia and Sword Soul Tenny, and can also be very good against, like, Philanderees as well. I'm just thinking, like, Yumi control against a Karyu Shin. Forbidden Droplet's pretty good. So, yeah, there's definitely a fair number of targets for it. It's just a matter of, like, is your deck able to, do you have the room for it, and two, are you able to accommodate the proper resources for it? Adventure Prank-Kids is a kind of borderline deck for me in that regard. I think we definitely could be playing Droplets in here. Again, I just decided to lean more into the Veilers / Imperms, which also hurt Branded Despia and Sword Soul Tenny and Philanderees and all the other decks a fair bit. They're just less resource intensive. So, but yeah, Forbidden Droplet is definitely an addition I could see making to this deck here. The extra deck, I have also thought about maybe including Totally Awesome in order to, you know, make use of the multiple Dropsies that we're playing. As far as what I would drop for that, it'd probably be Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. However, I will say, I threw this card in, not necessarily on a whim, but I threw it in with the thought that, you know, maybe if we need to shore up some late game, we can at least, because, you know, Prank-Kids, if nothing else, is pretty good at spitting out a whole bunch of materials onto the field. Like, you know, it's not hard to have, like, 4 monsters out if you have, like, you know, 2 Prank-Kids. I mean, I'm speaking from, like, experience at this point, but if you have, like, 2 Prank-Kids left over from a combo, you can, like, link them into Dodo Doodle Do, and then you'll get 2 more from your deck, and you have 4 monsters right there, plus your opponent's 1 to go into Goddess, the Underworld Goddess here. So that can be a really, really good late game kind of strategy. And again, I included this in the extra deck with this in mind. I'd actually kind of spaced on Totally Awesome, otherwise I probably would have just thrown in Totally Awesome and taken this out. But I don't know, after playing with this and there being a couple of situations where the Underworld Goddess actually really came up, I'm probably going to be keeping her in the extra deck, honestly. So at this point, I don't know, maybe one of the Link Spiders. The second Link Spider is more here for Nibiru insurance, but I don't know how often that necessarily comes up, so it's definitely more of a niche extra deck spot. I mean, the Totally Awesome, to be fair, is a fairly niche extra deck spot, but maybe even a little bit less so than the second Link Spider, so I might be making that change if I decide to try this deck out a little bit more in the future, which I'm honestly feeling inclined to do. So yeah, I think that's about everything I wanted to talk about here. So let's go ahead and break down the list card by card, and then I'll show you these games here. So we're going to be playing 2 Effect Veiler, 2 Prank-Kids Fansies, 3 Maxx, 3 Prank-Kids Dropsies, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 3 Prank-Kids Lampsies, 1 Destiny Hero Denier, 1 Water Enchantress of the Temple, 2 Prank-Kids Rocksies, 1 Destiny Hero Dasher, 1 Wandering Gryphon Rider, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Harpie's Feather Duster, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Fusion Destiny, 2 Rite of Aramesir, 1 Dracoback the Rideable Dragon, 2 Prank-Kids Place, 1 Prank-Kids Pranks, 1 Fateful Adventure, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Prank-Kids Pandemonium, 1 Crossout Designator, 3 Infinite Impermanence is going to round out the main deck. Extra deck will contain 1 Prank-Kids Rocket Ride, 1 Prank-Kids Weather Washer, 1 Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, 1 Prank-Kids Battle Butler, 2 Link Spider, 1 Prank-Kids Meow Meow Moo, 2 Prank-Kids Doodle Do, 1 Prank-Kids Bow Wow Bark, 1 Predaplant Verte Anaconda, 1 Knightmare Unicorn, 1 Prank-Kids Rip Roar and Roaster, 1 Accesscode Talker, and then finally 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. Alright, there's the deck. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these games. Okay, so the first match we're going to take a look at is against Branded Despia. So like I said, these are like the first 5 games that I played with this deck, these 5 that we're going to see here. And within these 5 games, we already faced quite a lot of meta decks. At the time that I'm playing this is actually the very start of Season 11 here, the first day of it here. So yeah, you know, we could be expecting to see a lot of meta decks because, of course, you know, I'm basically up against a bunch of other Diamond players at this point. So yeah, in any case here, we're going to start off with a fairly typical Prank-Kids line, leading off with the, which one do we start off with? Dropsies, going into Fansies. Oh, I'm going to have to throw in my combo guides here, aren't I? It's been a while since I've had a link to, well, because it's been a while since I posted a Prank-Kids video, but yeah, I'll have to grab the links for those. Check out the description there to see, you know, exactly how the Prank-Kids lines play out if, you know, it's been a bit since you've played with or against the deck. It's definitely been a few months it's been relevant, or maybe you're relatively new to Master Duel and you know, weren't around when this deck was super relevant. So yeah, if you want to check that out again, feel free to in the description below there. I did already open the Pandemonium, so I can just go ahead and get an extra Prank-Kids Place here. I don't really intend to activate it because I don't need to be adding more Prank-Kids monsters at this point. In fact, after the first combo, you kind of want to keep as many Prank-Kids monsters in your deck as possible for the follow-up turn. So instead, I'm going to be using this Prank-Kids Place to banish with the Rocksies effect to get an extra draw. Since I don't need it anyway, then, you know, it's just going to be a free extra cycle at this point. We get a Wandering Gryphon Rider, but yeah, no, without the Fateful Adventure token out, there is not going to be a way for us to, you know, special ed and use the Omni Negate effect, unfortunately. But, you know, we do have the Pandemonium, of course, for the Battle Butler setup, and then an Imperm down, as well as an Effect Veiler in hand. So we do have quite a few options to stop our opponent's plays here. They're going to lead with the Harpie's Feather Duster, which is definitely a little bit annoying. It's not, you know, annoying because we have to flip a Pandemonium here. You want to flip a Pandemonium as early as possible during your opponent's main phase anyway, in order to have the Battle Butler out as early as possible to make sure that we're getting those disruptions in when we need to. It's just annoying because we're going to end up losing the Imperm here, but it's just an overall 1-for-1 trade, so nothing too concerning here. And of course, since we're fusing all of the Prank-Kids and their once per turn, it's our opponent's turn, we haven't used their effects this turn, so we get 3 special summons on top of the Battle Butler, is what makes this combo so powerful, of course, in addition to the Battle Butler being a Raigeki that you can use twice during your opponent's turn, because you can banish the Meow Meow move for one of those activations there. So opponent's going to activate some of the Albert here. I'll go ahead and use the Veiler, but my opponent has a Called By, so that's really annoying. The Imperm would have been really, really nice here, but unfortunately, like we saw, it got Feather Dustered, so alas. Let's see, and at this point my opponent's going to end up, of course, adding and then activating the Branded Fusion. I do actually make a misplay here, where I use the Battle Butler's effect in response to the Branded Fusion, banishing the Meow Meow Moo. For some reason, I don't know, I just completely had a brain fart moment where for some reason I thought the chain would resolve the other way, and I was like, oh, the Lubellion will come out and I'll get to pop it before it gets a chance to activate its effect. But then, of course, after I did it, I realized, like, wait, what am I thinking? Chains resolve backwards. Battle Butler is going to resolve first, and I'm only going to pop their Hour Burst. So, yeah, that was definitely throwing away the Meow Meow move for no reason, which you do have to be mindful of. I mean, of course, you know, even if Meow Meow move was still at 3, that still wouldn't have been a good play, but especially because we only have one Meow Meow Moo, and I'm not going to have it for the rest of the game now. That was definitely a bit more of a sting, that misplay, than it even normally would have been. So, opponent's going to use the Mirror Jade here. I'm, of course, going to respond with the Battle Butler. And so, really what this misplay with the Battle Butler ultimately ended up costing me, in addition to the Meow Meow Moo, is this Rocksies here, because, of course, the If I had used the Meow Meow Moo, well, honestly, I wouldn't have used the Meow Meow Moo in that case because I knew the Mirror Jade would have banished a Battle Butler anyway, so there's no point. So actually, it really was just losing the Meow Meow Moo. We would have lost the Roxies either way, so... Well, I guess we would have used the Meow Meow Moo in that case, duh, because... Or no, we wouldn't have, I just said we wouldn't have, never mind. Anyway, enough about the hypothetical game. Let's go back on the one that's actually happening in front of us. So, yeah, I've got 2 extra Prank-Kids monsters. It's actually the game I was kind of referring to in the profile there, when I talked about how useful Underworld Goddess of the Closed World is. As we're about to see here, I think you might see where this is going, what my opponent's doing here. So, they're going to flip up the branded in red. I'm pretty sure, do we know they haven't added Libitum? I think they added it with a Tragedy last turn, so... pretty sure they did. In any case, they're fusing Ad Libitum and Tragedy, so they're going to be getting their Mirror Jade back in addition to this Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. But, you know, since I linked into a Prank-Kids monster, I get 2 more Prank-Kids out from my deck here. So, I have a total of 4 materials on the board. The Ad Libitum is going to bring back the Mirror Jade, and now we have an amazing opportunity to Underworld Goddess our opponent here. And I have not resolved this card's, or not resolved this card's effect really, but summoned this monster that often, but like, the times that you get to, this card is devastating. I actually am a huge fan of this card. I kind of was before, but especially after this game. You might have seen when I showed off all my decks in that recent video that came out, I've included Underworld Goddess in a fair amount of decks that a fair amount more than I have in the past, because I really want to be trying her out more. Plus, it's like, you know, I went to the trouble of crafting her, I might as well use her, right? So, I'll set this Prank-Kids Dropsies here to potentially go into a Verte Anaconda next turn is what I'm thinking. So, yeah, in addition to the Underworld Goddess, of course, my actual main backup plan post a Prank-Kids turn 1 combo where we use the Meow Meow Moo is pretty much to go into DPE. Which, you know, of course is not as strong as a Prank-Kids follow-up play, but the DPE itself is still, you know, a fine enough follow-up play to handle whatever the rest of the opponent has. But in this case, we're actually going to be using the Underworld Goddess here, because I'm not really drawing much gas, but I don't really mind drawing this Disruption on top of the Goddess here at all, because, you know, obviously she's got a lot of attack points. My opponent's not going to have an easy time running over her. She's unaffected by not all, but definitely a lot of effects. Nice top deck by the opponent. Too bad we have the Ash Blossom, by the way, here. Lol. And that's actually going to cause him to concede. So, on top of that, you know, we can stop our opponent from using graveyard-based effects as well. Or, I guess, effects that special summon from the graveyard, which can be relevant in this matchup. So, you know, the Goddess is not a bad boss monster to be sitting on here. So, again, to be drawing all this disruption on top of that, the Imperm, the Called By, all that stuff is definitely fine by me and is enough to secure the victory here. So, that's going to be the first game. Let's go and take a look at the next one. Alright, so this duel is going to be against Sword Soul Tenny. Again, continuing our trend of facing up against meta decks here. And we'll be taking the second turn. I think that was the case last time? Or did we go first? No, we went first last time. Yeah, because we had the setup here. So we're actually going second here. And we don't have any kind of disruption in our hand whatsoever. So, yeah, as soon as my opponent starts doing stuff here, I'm like, oh no. Oh no, this is going to be rough. This is definitely going to be rough here. So, my opponent has pretty much unfettered access to their deck at this point. You know, they've got the Moye, they've got the Logon. I want to nitpick what my opponent did here, by the way. The way that they summon this. Sorry, Dante, if you're watching. I will nitpick your play slightly here, because if I had had a Nibiru, that would have completely been a blowout at that point. It would have hit all of your cards, and you would have just had the token and one other card in hand. So, I will say, I do think you should have gone for the Chi Xiao first, or the Long Yon first, if you're able to do that on top of the other plays. I guess, I don't know why I'm speaking to you assuming that you're watching. I just, I don't know. I don't know that I'm that popular, but... in any case here, we don't have the Nibiru, so there's no punish, so it doesn't really matter in any case. And the opponent even has the Proto set up here, which is super duper scary. Super duper scary. I mean, you know, Dark doesn't really affect us too much. We can't DPE, but that's about it. But just the fact that they have the Protoss on top of the Chi Xiao and the Baron and 2 face sounds, like, I'm thinking, like, my god, this has to be a Blackout in something else, right? Blackout in Call By, Blackout in Imperm, Blackout in Crossout, maybe. We did top deck the Feather Duster. It's 2 Call Bys, by the way, which wasn't that scary, but is, you know, definitely still want a Feather Duster 2 back rows. So that was a really lucky top deck on our part. I'll go ahead and activate the place here before going into my link plays, because this means I can chain block my Prank-Kids effects. Because Prank-Kids Place actually has this effect that doesn't come up super often, but if you link summon, you can drop your opponent's monster's attack points all by 500. Like, each of their monsters drop their attack by 500. And that attack reduction doesn't usually come up. It's actually going to be very relevant in this particular game, but it doesn't usually come up that much. But it's more useful for chain blocking, because now my opponent can't use the Baron's effect on the Dropsies, because the latest effect on the chain is a Prank-Kids place. And if they want to Baron that, I'm totally fine with that. That is a ideal use of their Baron for me. But of course they don't do that. Wouldn't expect them to anyway. So we'll drop their attack, we'll summon the Rocksies. Now we can link into the Doodle Do. Once again, we can chain block the effect here, the Rocksies effect here, in order to ensure that... Oh, no, actually, sorry. We would normally chain block the Rocksies effect there with the Doodle Do. However, in this case, I opted to do it the other way around, because I did actually want the Baron to negate this Rocksies. I want the Doodle Do to resolve, and if my opponent is going to negate it, I want to force them to use the Chi Xiao to do it. That way they don't have any more negations, and I can continue to make plays, without having to worry about that. But in this case, I want the Pandemonium from the deck more than I want the random draw from the Rocksies. So my opponent does in fact Baron the Rocksies, and then does in fact use the Chi Xiao on the Doodle Do. So there goes both my opponent's negations. The Baron's done for good now. The Chi Xiao just for this turn, of course. I do, however, still have an issue where I can't summon DPE. This does actually matter a bit more now, because my original plan I was thinking like, oh, I can just Prank-Kids Pranks and then go for the token, go for Link Spider, go for Verte, and then I realized, wait, no, I can't, because of Protos. So I think this is still fine though, like relatively speaking. Like, even if my opponent clears this board, they still can't win this turn. And I did get an Ash Blossom off the draw, which should stop most follow-up plays. Protos is going to call Fire here, which obviously they have to. They can't call Wind because they'll destroy their own Baron, but I will say Wind is generally the better, or maybe even best call. I would even say best call against Prank-Kids, if you have to hit one attribute and have like the luxury of choice there. But yeah, hitting Fire, thanks Maxie, right on time by the way. Hitting Fire here is going to hurt me a little bit, but not like completely stop me from making plays here. By the way, good thing we put Meow back in the extra deck so that we can make additional plays here. Of course, we didn't really have the Battle Butler set up to, use it anyway, but this is one of those games where it definitely helps to have the pranks to continuously shuffle or not shuffle, but you know what I mean, put the Meow back in your extra deck. Alright, of course we're going to go for Doodle Do next here. Now I will want to chain block the Rocksies, because I do care more about getting that than the Doodle Do surge here. We will get both. It's funny, I expected that Chi Xiao negate the Doodle Do here, but they actually opted not to. I don't know if they were more scared of like the DPE coming down, because now Dark is available to be special summoned, but that could be the case. In any case here, I'm going to Pandemonium and fuse my Dropsies in order to get a Weather Washer. I can't do the Rocket Ride because we can't do Fire this turn, but I also want to just get the Dropsies effect off. Excuse me. I was actually thinking about going for Underworld Goddess here is the main reason why I made the Weather Washer, but then I realized, my stuff actually just can battle over theirs, and I can save the Weather Washer for my opponent's turn to get two Prank-Kids monsters back out from my graveyard. So, given that my opponent's in top deck mode, they can't battle over my board. I've got Ash plus Imperm. I'm actually totally fine just leaving the Doodle Do and Weather Washer out without going into the Underworld Goddess here. Opponent's going to take their turn and then promptly concede. So yeah, that ended up being the right play there. Represented enough threat for future plays, gave a lot of options for future plays, and like I said, the Chi Xiao at that point really was just not relevant at all. So that game actually showed just how strong Prank-Kids plays can be, particularly the Link Summon, the drop attack effect. It's not an effect you think about a lot, but when it comes up, it can be very relevant. And that was a game where it was extremely relevant. The place single-handedly kind of turned the tide of that game for me there. So, alright, let's go take a look at the next game now. Alright, this duel here is going to be against Shadal's. I was going to say the 60-card grass variant, but like, when was the last time you saw a non-60-card grass Shadal deck? Really, that deck is like made to be played at 60 cards. It's too bad Shadals have so many ultra rare cards, because they're an archetype I'd love to explore, but it's such a heavy crafting commitment. So this is going to be a little bit more in line of like I was going to say typical read busted Prank-Kids hand, where we actually have the adventure setup and the Prank-Kids, and then we also have a Maxi and an Ash Blossom on top of that. The Water Enchantress is seemingly a little less relevant, but is actually going to come up here. So, because we started with the adventure line, we can actually chain block the first Prank-Kids effect with the Fateful Adventure. This is actually very, very relevant, and some Prank-Kids adventure decks in the past have even played more than one Fateful Adventure specifically for this effect, right? The idea is that You've got the adventure out, you normal summon your Prank Kid, you don't activate Adventure Search when you normal summon the Prank Kid, but when you link it to Meow Meow Moo, then you do the Adventure Search because you can chain block the first Prank Kid effect, making it unable to get Ash Blossomed, right? Your opponent will only be able to Ash Blossom the Fateful Adventure Search for the Dracoback there. So, very, very handy. One of many ways in which Adventure Engine plays well with the Prank Kids here. And yeah, at this point I'm going to activate the Adventure for the Wandering Gryphon Rider, and the opponent's going to Ash Blossom. So I consider that a major plus here. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is actually particularly good against Prank Kids because all of the Prank Kids effects that summon from deck, well obviously because they summon from deck, they can get hit by the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring there. So for my opponent to use the Ash on the Fateful Adventure here, that is a-okay with me. Of course, if they'd allowed the search and I got the Gryphon, then I could have just Gryphoned the Ash anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter either way, but this actually is even a little bit better for me. Not even a little bit, this is actually definitely better for me, because the other way, well no, actually the other way would put the Gryphon back in my deck anyway, so it's actually the same no matter what. So in any case, we were able to successfully beat the Ash to keep it from interrupting our plays. I consider that a huge win here, so we were able to continue our combo. They're not necessarily unfettered, we do have Nibiru to think about, but even if our opponent's got Nibiru, we still have the Maxx here, so we'll get 2 draws off of it. And because we're playing multiple Link Spiders, there's even a chance if we draw like a Prank-Kids Pranks and then discard with it, we could even, we search the Pranks here, we could even potentially with the Pranks still make a Verte into DPE setup, even if we get hit with the Nibiru. So, I've talked about that in the profile. That is the reason why you would want 2 Link Spiders in the extra deck. But again, I was also still considering maybe dropping one of those for Totally Awesome, because like Totally Awesome has about as much use as the Nibiru Insurance, but I guess to be fair, Totally Awesome is often a follow-up play, where Nibiru Insurance is better for an initial play. And so having the card that's better for an initial play is probably better than having a card that's better for a follow-up play. Because obviously you can't make follow-up plays if you can't make initial plays, right? So this is kind of my mindset there. In any case, we're going to kind of continue with the regular Prank Kids setup, but I am going to throw in a Verte into DPE here at the end. The Prank-Kids Pandemonium does make it so you can only summon Prank Kids for the rest of the turn, so you do have to be mindful of that, but of course with the regular Prank Kids setup, we're just going to use Pandemonium on our opponent's turn anyway, so that doesn't really matter. Alright, so here we're going to go ahead and go into the Verte, like I mentioned. Send the Fusion Destiny. Sending, of course, Denier and Dasher. I think Denier and Dasher is the right combination of cards here, as far as just for DP. I mean, the right combination of Destiny Hero monsters. The Malicious would be a bit of a heavy deck requirement, having both copies, and this deck doesn't make quite as good of use as that many Link materials as other decks, because a lot of the stuff we're going into takes Prank Kids cards. So having the extra Link materials, I mean, it can still be nice for going into like Underworld Goddess or Accesscode Talker or something like that, but again, the main deck requirement is still just a little bit heavy there. So, opponent's got a Lightning Storm, kind of akin to the Feather Duster that we got hit with that other time. This time, of course, in addition to the Pandemonium, I am going to chain the Crossout Designator, and I'll preemptively call Infinite Impermanence here. Chaining the Crossout Designator in response to it being destroyed is something I typically like to do, and I'll just kind of go through my deck and see, like, okay, what can I afford to get rid of that my opponent might be reasonably likely to use here? He'll hit an Imperm, which could actually potentially hinder me if they try to use it against, like, my DP or Battle Butler. Maybe. I mean, obviously it'll depend on the situation, but, again, it just seemed like the most relevant card to hit here, so that's why I decided to hit. Oh, I threw what do you call it, the Battle Butler in the extra monster zone here, because I wanted to leave enough main monster zones to summon all 3 of my Prank Kids monsters here. I do have to be mindful that if I don't end up tributing the Battle Butler away this turn, I'm not going to be able to link summon because my extra monster zone is occupied, but I think it's worth it to get the extra Prank Kids here. Yeah, I'm just going to rip an Ash Blossom in response to this Branded Fusion. Like, no hesitation. No hesitation. There's no way that's resolving. Not if I have anything to say about it. And then, yeah, when my opponent activates a Magical Meltdown, I'm definitely going to respond with the DPE here, because I can pop the Verte Anaconda and the Magical Meltdown. The Meltdown will not add the Alistair, and then my opponent's only going to have 2 cards left in hand. I still have the 2 pops with the Battle Butler, as well as a Maxx in hand, in case those last 2 cards do end up being enough shenanigans there. But they don't seem to be, as the opponent concedes as soon as they realize their Magical Meltdown is not going to resolve. So that is a pretty nice win for us there. We've got 2 more games to look at. Let's go and jump right into the next one. Alright, next duel here we have is against ignister. It's been a while since I played with or against this deck. I still need to come back to it. It's definitely been a while since I've come back to it. I would very much like to. I still need to show off the Heat Soul line, so... I need to update the combo guide with that at some point. Nah, we'll figure it out, but... Yeah, I'll go and start with the Rite of Aramesir here. But my opponent's got a Maxx in response. It's definitely going to be more than a bit rough, but... I can still summon the Wandering Gryphon Rider here. It's going to end up ultimately giving them a +1 if I do, but I think that's worth it to end on at least some kind of Omni-Negate, as opposed to just nothing at all here. Besides, this way I've got the Omni-Negate, plus I've got a Veiler in hand as well. I'll definitely equip the Draco back here. There's no reason not to. It'll keep my adventure token from being destroyed by battle once this turn, so that's definitely relevant. Yeah, opponent leads with the Chi-Chi. I'm going to let this resolve because I want the Dark Infant to be the thing I Veiler. And then, of course, just have the DPE for, like, if they have, like, a call by for that Veiler, or if they have something else, like a follow-up play. Just want to make sure that I am doing that. So I was kind of curious, like, what my opponent was doing here with the Hiyari into the Gachiri, and then, you know, linking that into... But then I realized as they linked that into the Dark Infant that, oh, this is actually going to protect them from the Wandering Gryphon Rider. It's going to chain block. That's why they did it this way. So, very, very good move on my opponent's part. Very, very nice. I do have the Veiler for the Dark Infant here. However, my opponent's got a sick follow-up play with this Forbidden Droplet to not only send the Dark Infant, keeping it from being negated, but then to also negate my Gryphon Rider. So, like, I gotta, you know, this is definitely a golf clap. Tip my hat to my opponent here for this play with the Sad Ignister play. Yeah, again, not only setting up the chain block for the Dark Infant so that I couldn't Gryphon Rider, but then actually having, like, the best possible follow-up play to the Veiler with the Droplet. To be fair, I gave my opponent a lot of resources to make that play, but I don't think that's a play I would have necessarily spotted if I was in my opponent's spot. Ooh, also they have a very pretty royal I meet you. So at this point, I know my opponent's just got, you know, the Splash Mage into Update Jammer into Accesscode OTK. I'll just let them play it out. I respect Ignister enough to let them do their stuff and do their thing. So yeah, if this is gonna be my loss and oh, well, I guess yeah, whatever. In any case, yeah, if this is going to be a loss, this is definitely one that I am not too disappointed to take here. Update Jammer is such a ridiculous card. Like, after playing both Ignister and Salamangreats, like, it's so ridiculous how good that card is. It makes Cyberstix in general a lot more appealing to me. I kind of want to try Code Talkers at some point, because I think I've already got pretty much everything for Code Talkers anyway. There might be like one or two more ultra rares for the extra deck I'm missing or something like that. I looked into it at one point, but yeah, Code Talkers is a deck I'm thinking of trying, like crafting maybe at some point. I'm still thinking of maybe crafting a Pendulum deck, either Deities or Pendulum Magicians. I haven't decided which one yet. They'd both end up costing me like 4 ultra rares, I think, which is not a lot at all as far as you know, crafting commitment. So still kind of on the fence about that, but. Yeah, you know, GG's to my opponent here again. If I'm going to take an L, I'm definitely satisfied taking an L to Ignisters. We do have one more game to watch, so let's go ahead and jump straight into that. Alright, last duel here is going to be against a Relinquished control deck, which is definitely a first for me. I mean, I know that Relinquished got, you know, legacy support, like Thousand Eyes got support, but this is definitely my first time playing against a dedicated deck for it, so... I think maybe one time I saw an opponent instant fusion for the Millenniumizer Strict or whatever. I think that's the card, but yeah, this is a pretty standard adventure setup here. I'll start with the Rite of Aramesir. For the Fateful Adventure, some of the Dropsies like bedded to the Meow Meow Moo, waiting to use the Fateful Adventure with the Meow Meow Moo summon to chain block the Dropsies like I mentioned earlier. This will also, of course, get us the Gryphon Rider setup here. We'll add the Draco back to be discarded for the Gryphon Rider, is what I mean by that, so... Yep, I'll use the Fateful Adventure. Like I said, add the Gryphon Rider, discard the Draco back, equip that to the adventure token, special the Gryphon Rider, and then continue my main Prank-Kids line from there. Looks like you do want to be thinking relatively early on in the combo about what you're going to banish with Rocksies. Here I'm thinking it's probably going to be Harpie's Feather Duster. It's a bit of a hedge, right? Because if my opponent's playing, like, particularly like Eldritch or something, then that's going to be a bit of an oof to have banished that, but I think that's really the main deck I'm thinking of that I could reasonably expect to you know, regularly run into, where I'd rather have the Feather Duster over, say, like the Veiler or the Called By. I think in most situations, even against Eldritch, like, the Called By is still good for banishing Eldritch and making sure they don't get the Golden Lord out on the board. Plus, the Floodgates are more than likely, unless something like Rivalry or Ghost, and especially Ghost is really brutal against this deck, but if it's not like Rivalry or Gozen, then it's not gonna a floodgate won't mess up my board too much because I've obviously already made the board. So plus I do have the Gryphon rider as well, so I'm not as scared of back row for pretty much all those reasons kind of combined. So I'm going to hedge and banish the Feather Duster with the Rocksies. But like I was saying, it is important to be mindful relatively early on in the combo what you're going to banish with Rocksies. You don't want to end up in a situation where you feel like you have to keep everything and then you're like, oops, now I have to banish something I really need for Rocksies. So, alright, yep, getting the stuff back with the Bow Wow Bark here. You do want to do that during the draw phase to avoid your Bow Wow Bark getting Kaiju'd, which is actually, my opponent had a Kaiju here, so I didn't even think about that when I said that just now. There was one of those other games, I forgot which one it was, I forgot to point it out, where I Bow Wow Barked during the main phase. That was definitely a misclick on my part. I meant to and should have done it during the draw phase, the opponent's draw phase there, again, to avoid getting Kaiju, which my opponent had. My opponent had a Kaiju here, so like, I feel like the Charlie Day meme where he's pointing at the conspiracy board right now, but that is actually a reason why, and I actually have in the past gotten my Bow Wow Bark Kaiju'd, so not just being paranoid playing around something. I do think that is actually a very relevant thing to play around. Oh, so okay, here we go. I get the all the Prank-Kids monsters here, right? Now my opponent's going to have a couple of ways to equip this Battle Butler, so I have to be mindful about what order when I'm using my Battle Butler and when I am doing all this other stuff here, right? So opponent's going to activate Foolish Burial, setting the Illusionize thing. I don't care, that's fine, I can call by that. Now they're going to use a relinquished fusion effect in order to try to equip my Battle Butler. Here, I'm going to respond with the Battle Butler to destroy the Millennium Eyes Restrict. Obviously, if it's not on board, my opponent can't equip it. I know that my opponent's Millennium Eyes Restrict can then equip my Battle Butler. They'll still lose it, but then I'll lose my Battle Butler. But fortunately, I've got the Effect Veiler here too. It was important to wait for my opponent to do this. If I tried to preemptively Battle Butler and then Millennium Eyes Restrict, I could have still Veiled it, but then my opponent would have gotten the Relinquished Fusion effect and still been able to equip anyway. So I did specifically want to wait for my opponent to start activating effects before chaining them. That can and often does matter just in general, but especially when you've got disruption like Battle Butler here. It's important to be mindful of thinking like, okay, when the chain resolves, who's going to have the advantage at the end of it. You particularly want to be mindful at the end of the chain, because then you can work out backwards how things are going to resolve from there. So yeah, the way that things resolved with this chain leak, my opponent ended up with nothing, not even this Illusion Magician as I go to banish it with a call by. They've only got one card left against my board, which, to be fair, I'm not even out of disruption at this point. I've still got another Battle Butler. I was going to say I'm out of disruption at this point, but my opponent's only got one card anyway, and again, I actually do still have another Battle Butler there, so, but, you know, that one card isn't going to be enough. That's going to be a GG from the opponent there. So that does it for the gameplay. Let's go ahead and move now to the outro. Alright everybody, thank you for watching all the way to the very end like this. I do definitely appreciate that. Very much so, not just personally, but of course as a means of supporting the channel. Comments, I definitely appreciate seeing those. Definitely comments, let me know what you think about Adventure Prank-Kids as a whole. Not just the build, of course, I'm obviously always looking for feedback about builds and gameplay as well. But here I'm definitely looking to get everyone's thoughts on Adventure Prank-Kids. Like I've said multiple times now, and I said a lot during the initial intro slash, showing off the deck there, I think this deck is being slept on. Not like, it's a tier 1 deck, but it's definitely tier 3 or rogue. Probably rogue, to be fair, but the fact that it's not even seeing rogue representation is a bit of a crime, I think. Like, yeah, this deck got hit a lot, but it's still really good, I think. I mean, we saw a lot of games where we see just how strong these opening lines still are, and how it can go toe-to-toe even with current meta decks, so... the branded despia as a sword still continues. We did manage to come out on top of this. Again, now I'm not trying to hype this deck up too much after only 5 games, but I will say those were 5 very solid games, and yeah, I'm definitely willing to keep trying this deck more in the future, and who knows, hopefully maybe after seeing this video, some of you watching are a little more willing to give it a try as well. But so yeah, I want to thank everyone who's commenting, again, not just for supporting the video and the channel in that regard, but just so I can get everyone's input. I very much value that input there. And then if you feel like subscribing, very much appreciate that too. That is the best way to get notified of when my videos drop, which does happen every single day. So know that when you subscribe, you are getting a daily Master Duel video. But I think that's all the time that I have for today. So without further ado, this is XLEX. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.